In this video example, we're going to continue our exploration of the various territory types. We're going to cover a few of the lesser used types of territories, and those are polygon territories, radius territories, and global territories. And before we go creating each type, I want to explain briefly what each one is. A polygon territory allows you to define a custom drawn boundary that defines a particular territory. These are commonly used for smaller territories or territories that are hard to describe. For example, if I provided services in southeastern Wisconsin. If you didn't want to go through the effort of specifying every county that may or may not be defined as southeastern Wisconsin, you can simply draw a boundary that reflects your interpretation of southeastern Wisconsin, and the results will be returned accordingly. The next one is radius territories. So these are commonly used for service areas as to define a particular radius around the location. So for example, which you can envision as a circle around a particular location. So let's say, for example, if I had a 50-mile radius territory, that would define a circle 50 miles in radius, 100 miles across, around my particular location. So I'm willing to drive in every direction 50 miles away from my location. And then the final one that we'll talk about is global territories. Global territory is a bit of an edge case, but it means the entire world. So any search that you perform will match against a global territory. So relatively straightforward. So now let's dive in to actually creating these. Like every other territory field in MetaLocator, these are they start with creating a field. And so within MetaLocator, if you go to your fields, you will see that you can create territory fields of type territory polygon, territory radius, and then global territory. I've already done that in this account, but if you need to do that, go to Fields and then New, specify a name for your territory polygon, which is the one we're going to cover first, and then make sure that you choose polygon in the list of field types. Once that's created, under your custom fields for any location, you're going to see a map that allows you to draw a particular territory. And this is one of the territory types, I think, and the only territory type that you have to manually specify in the editor. You can't import it. And so in this case, I'm going to click on the map and I'm going to draw a territory that represents the southeastern half of Wisconsin, making sure to close the territory as shown and indicated by the highlighted area. I can clear the territory if I don't like the map that I drew. And then I can also manipulate these markers by dragging them and dropping them. And so that allows me to specify for this location a particular territory. While we're in here, we're also going to cover the territory radius field. And I'm going to say that this location should service any location within any search within 50 miles of its location. So that means 50 miles around the location's latitude and longitude. So if we switch over to this side, we can see that this location is in it's around Tacoma, Washington. And if the map decides to display, we can see that anywhere 50 miles around that location, this location should be returned for a search. So let's go ahead and hit save and then switch to the interface and do a couple tests. For these tests, I've made a couple adjustments to my interface. Number one, I've removed some of the stuff that we tested in previous examples, like category, country, and state. I've also introduced a radius dropdown simply to help us illustrate how territories work when you're searching by distance with a radius territory. And the other thing I've done is I've added the distance in the results, again, just to illustrate how territories work. So notice this one says approximately 328 miles from, in this case, 5 through 202. So let's perform a couple tests. The first one we're going to test is the radius category, or excuse me, the radius territory. You might remember that we defined a 50-mile radius around this particular location. And so I'm going to illustrate that territory matches are in addition to distance-based matches here as well. So let's search for the zip code itself, 98421, 98421. Within 5 miles. This should represent 0 miles because it's basically right on top of that zip code. But now let's look at a zip code that's a little bit further away, 98373. 98373. And click search. And so this zip code is actually about 10 miles away from this particular location here at 98421. But our radius said 5 miles. And the reason this location returns is because territory matches are not influenced by distance, remember. And so this also illustrates one particular challenge with territories that we'll cover in the troubleshooting section, that sometimes people can be confused by why a particular result was returned. And so sometimes it's important to display in the results that a particular result is being returned because it matches territory. So again, this result is completely accurate because this location services searches within 50 miles of its location. You searched within 50 miles of its location, and so it was appropriately returned as a result according to that radius territory. So the next one we're going to test is that Polygon territory. As you might recall, that defined basically the lower half of Wisconsin. And so if I go to this handy website, UnitedStatesZipCodes.org, it gives me a really nice reference map to see all the zip codes. So I could basically probably pick anyone in here. I think I probably drew the boundary around most of these. Let's try 53227. 53227. And that should give me results that, yes, indicate that this particular location is also serviced by that polygon boundary that overlapped basically the lower half of the state of Wisconsin. And so those are examples of polygon territories and radius territories. And the last one we'll talk about is global territories. These are commonly used for things like a global territory or some result that should always be included. So some people might use this for headquarters. They might use it for like a main corporate office that does kind of everything. Honestly, it's not used a ton because sometimes, again, people might not understand why is this result continuing to be returned. But in other cases, it simply does end up being useful as a tool to get a particular result to return, sometimes in combination with other territory options. So let's try making a global territory. And we'll pick global territory from the results, or the field type. Global territory is kind of unique in that the data only needs to be a 1 or a 0, indicating you either have that global territory or you don't. So if we go to global territory and we specify that this one location should be returned for that global territory, we can go ahead and hit save. And now for any search that we perform, this location should be returned as a result. So let's switch over to the interface and do a few tests. So again, I'll use my handy map here at UnitedStatesZipCodes.org, and I'll just go kind of out in the middle of the country where we know we don't have any results. And I'll try, I think I'm out here in Nebraska, I'll try 68055. Because this location is a global territory, sample location 1 should now be returned. And so no matter what search we perform, what geographic search we perform, that location will be returned. And so hopefully that covers the different territory types. These are less used territory types, but still useful. Polygon territories, radius territories, and global territories.